Welcome to another edition of Stand Alone, where we go from being ordinary to extraordinary. Listen, I am so excited about our guest today because when we're thinking about having great presence of wisdom amongst us, I can't think of anyone better than Ed Hiner. So, I have to read this. There's so much in terms of accomplishment, but when you think of being 20 years as a career for a Navy SEAL operator and officer, a lieutenant commander, not only have you worked in the most challenging teams, now what you do is you go to companies and you help them to manage fear and manufacture motivation, which I really want us to talk about today because a lot of companies need help with this. But you, as a role in the Navy Special Warfare Training Officer, Lieutenant Commander, you were the first ever Navy SEAL in recorded history to be spot promoted for a combat command in Ramadi. Can you explain to us what that means and why that is so significant? First, if you can explain that, but I just want to start off by saying thank you for being here with us. Thank you for your service. Ed, I do not take lightly being in the presence of greatness. Reading your book, which you are the author of two great books. Today, we're going to go into guts, which I believe we need a lot more of today, so that we can help to just perform. And like your title says, be great under stress. Being great isn't about having no stress. It's being great with stress. So what does that mean to be the first ever Navy SEAL in recorded history to be spot promoted for a combat command for the battle in Ramadi? Because I think that's a beautiful thing. It made you stand alone in a group of leaders. You were a leader amongst leaders. You've helped design the training program for the SEALs. I know you're also a major part in creating the ethos for the SEALs, which is so huge. So what does that mean? And so that we can understand more and understand who we're really in the presence of today.
Well, thank you. God, I don't think that's my whole bio, but it was obviously after 9/11, it was in 2005 when I came from an organization called Task Force Black, which is like basically under JSOC, Joint Special Operation Command, and I was with the British Special Forces at the time, and I came out of that whole organization. I was wanted to be a ground force commander again, and I was too junior. I was a lieutenant, and normally it was like a lieutenant commander above, but the experience level in our senior leadership, our middle leadership or whatever, was not there. So I was begging for the job for a long time, and finally I got it. And yeah, it was to me it was very unique because one day I was a lieutenant, the next minute I was a lieutenant commander, and they're like, "Hey, good luck." No prep time, nothing. Was like, have at it, which was pretty unique. I mean, I didn't think much of it at the time. I don't think I did. It was just kind of one of those jobs I was doing and stuff. Yeah, but yeah, as far as I know, I was the first actual SEAL, Navy SEAL, to be promoted for combat.
That's
So
awesome. And
yeah,
you, like you said before, you are part of the British Special Boat Services,
yeah,
which is, I think that's also unique because you were able to see how they operated relative to the US Special
yeah,
Forces.
I
What
did.
would you say are like some things that you saw, when people are performing at such an elite level, they're still different. What were the differences that you saw in
Mm.
the two countries that you could then, use to your advantage to be even better?
Well, one of the biggest differences I recognize, they have a smaller country and a smaller chain of command. So the people I was with, the chain of command was very small. So they could just do a lot of different things that we would have to have multiple levels of approval of. And I used to notice that the British are very cavalier, right? That's a British word. And they didn't have the mission planning skills or the attention to detail skills that we did, really. But they were very gutsy, and they just thought big all the time. And to bring them, their training, their selection process is a little bit different than ours, or a lot different actually. And where ours is, SEAL teams focused on team training, and it's all about the team. Others focused. The British is exactly the opposite. It's individual focused. So their initiation training, their selection course, if you will, it's no one talking, no one collaborating, nothing. It's they just watch you. and then they select you off that. So you could see that in their everyday life, that they were more individually focused than we were. SEAL teams are more like group focused. And so, yeah, that to me was a little shocking, which I love a little bit of both. And they were very good at just being very accountable for themselves all over the world by themselves a lot of times. So, but same, it was a difference.
Yeah, I think that brings up a great point because in business, you have to perform as an individual,
Right.
obviously. And but the best businesses have a team dynamic where people are on, more mission driven. So what would you say is the one that kind of dominates and leads the way? Is it to be more team driven or to be more individualistic? Because this is something a lot of us in business grapple with a whole lot.
Hmm. I'd say maybe there's 50-50. I'm not really sure of the percentage, but you have to have individuals that are willing to do a lot.
Yeah.
But also the team dynamics that others focus that comes out in the team. And you can't, because in some big teams, you can hide inside the team and, not performing. There you can't. Individuals like, but I think there's probably just, both of those, the individual focus being like, hey, you're accountable. Every single thing happens, you own. And then when you put 2 people or 4 people or 10 people together, they all try to own the whole thing. So that is where the team is, because a lot of teams, I think we think about teams where there's a lot of not non-performing going on inside those bigger teams. The bigger the team gets, like you can kind of hide out. But no, with the Brits, no way. And the SEAL team, same way. It's like we still want the individual to be hardcore, owning the whole mission themselves. And then if you get all those people owning that mission themselves, then you perform. So,
Yeah. And so this is why I wanted to get in with your book today. Talking to the workforce today, I think is incredibly important. And it's going to be a powerful message for everyone to do some like self-reflection, but then also to look at themselves as a leader and to be self-aware that this is really what's happening right now. In your book, you stated from the Gallup poll, the state of American workplace, where it says 70% of employees are passively or actively disengaged in their work. You coming from such a specialized organization and then now working with businesses, this is a big problem for a lot of us, especially in this virtual environment where people are not as engaged. And I think a lot of it has to do with fear. And I want to talk to you about that today, because when you go into companies, you help them to manage fear. Would you say that there is a relationship between, I don't know if it's a fear of people missing out or they're afraid to not have that work-life balance anymore, so they're trying to do too much and then they're not doing anything at all. But what I find in the workplace is there is a big lack of focus, which is their ability to not be as engaged as possible. What could you speak on from your perspective of the importance of being focused, being where you are, and also knowing that when you're not engaged in your work or you're distracted, you're not just hurting that workplace, you're actually doing damage to yourself?
yeah, agreed. Well, yeah, I think, I mean, as you've heard me talk about that, as a lot of it, I think, comes down to obviously the purpose-driven world, right? Where you have a purpose, and that purpose can be the mission, obviously the mission, but also like, and as I speak about, is the love for everyone around you, your team. You actually engage in that team where you're responsible, accountable for those teammates, and that kind of drives things, because if you're isolated and it's just a paycheck or something like that, it's miserable. It would be a miserable existence, but you're not doing the team any good. And that's those Gallup polls that was, I think, like a 12-year study, and Gallup does really good studies. And that's really unfortunate that many people are either not engaged or disengaged. And I think if you bring an environment together where people feel that teamwork, that others focus, that I would say love, and that's kind of my thing, because once you feel that, then you'll do anything for the people around you. And that means the mission too. And obviously the employer has to, feel the same way and pay you and, treat you well as well. But I think that's what everyone yearns for. I mean, think about it. I mean, I think, I mean, human connection and those things, we yearn for that as human beings. We really do. Um,
Yeah,
and
I would agree. I would also say that, for self-esteem, which is a big issue
yeah,
for a lot of people today, and confidence, one of the things that I've been able to, learn from the Navy SEAL community is just that the confidence comes from your high level of competence.
yeah,
And it's not this bravado, it's not this
that's
arrogance that you have. It's this deep level of a conscious competence that you all have through deep levels of preparation. And so, why is that so incredibly important for people to hear today? Because we're all looking to be more confident. We want more self-esteem. But if we're failing to do just our work properly, what does that actually do to our self-esteem and our ability to deliver results in the place that we work?
well, the fear that we talk about, and
Mhm.
there, and fear is just, in some sense, not taking action, right? And even in combat, I mean, even the most crazy environments where it's chaos and you don't really know anything, it's just, you still prepare yourself constantly every day. You train, you do all these things to get yourself in that mental space. And then that kind of brings in the confidence level, because when you train and pray, prepare yourself the way we try to prepare ourselves, you're probably going to win, right? It just brings that confidence along. But if you sit there and just think about it and stew over it, awfulize, as I call, it's like, oh God, that's not going to help you. It's going to damage you. But we constantly, even in combat, we train and plan, just keep on getting after it, because that's taken action, which reduces anxiety, reduces stress, and also does a good thing for, the plan itself.
Yeah.
So, and
For the audience to know, like I've actually had the pleasure of meeting with Ed in person, and then you had spoken to my team live in person, and it was so great. And so I just want to go through and like systematically dissect some of the things we talked about, because it was so good, it was so profound, and just to like build it up for people to understand that, when you have a process behind your action, and we'll get into like after action reviews and all this stuff,
mm,
it just allows you to come from a place of greater confidence, which I think so many people they're lacking, and they're looking for this. And what we're looking for on the outside, it actually has to come from within. And so this is what I
right,
want to build up in people. And it starts off with, you know so we're talking about transforming ourselves, but what you shared with our team when you talked about mom, when you talked about mission first, others, then me, I would love for us to kick off this conversation and to really dive into that, because in a world today, we talked about how the British are more individualistic. I find myself being around people that are just more about themselves. And even for me, like every time I'm saying to myself, no, I want to do this for myself, I have to consciously say, is this right for the mission? Am I putting others before myself? Am I in service to others before myself? And so could you speak on this, you talk about the MOM. I would
yeah,
love for people to hear this, because I think we're doing it in the reverse order
right.
today, and it's causing a lot of pain, and it's fracturing a lot of relationships, and I think it's doing a lot of damage to businesses overall.
I would say if it's going the opposite direction, it would cause damage. But the mission of the me's, I mean, I love the model. Um, and I was talking to your folks, and me, I really found that in the back of that helicopter that night, right? When under the most stressful conditions of my human life. I mean, to everyone listening to this, I was so scared you can't even imagine, like this mortal fear that I was having. And I was inside myself. And I'd already been in combat. I'd been, 10 years or whatever it was, 12 years as a SEAL. But I was in the wrong direction. I was focusing on the wrong thing. And then once it clicked, and it clicked to like, look, one, your mission, because if you're doing a job or doing something in life, whatever you're doing, the mission does come first. I mean, you have to make money. Every business is, it's not a kumbaya. You actually have to make money. So the mission's first, others second, which is others focus. As a leader, you have to understand that. I think it's very important to you, because once you start focus on others and then me last, mom, then the anxiety, the fear and stuff goes away from you, because you're actually dealing something with someone else in this world. And I think it's just a human thing, that is a natural process that we go through. And when you do it as a leader and you allow yourself to go in that direction, as we say, leaders eat last, right? Because in our BUD SEAL training, the very first 6 months, we force the officers, and a lot of these guys, were from like Naval Academy, Dartmouth, Harvard, all the, but they actually eat in the back of the line. And the regular military doesn't necessarily do that, because they get privileges. But what we try to focus on is, look, you are serving. You're not to be served here. And you're a steward of this mission, of these people, and then, lastly, yourself. And that pretty much saved my life in the back of that helicopter. I finally adjusted to it. I'm like, oh my God, all those years of training, kind of clicked in again. I'm like, I just relearned something I should have known, and I did know, but I relearned it, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's great. You talk about in your book, you have a whole chapter on fear, and you say some powerful things where you say, like, to fear is human. So, this is powerful for people to understand. How do we get rid of fear? Or how do we control it and manage it so we can still perform? And you do talk about this word, like, awfulize. I would like to go into this a little bit more. You say when your mind awfulizes, fear replaces the unknown with the awful. So, what we are doing today is we are not doing enough, because we are creating these scenarios that aren't necessarily true. If we can talk about this, what do you do in that moment? And you reframed everything in that helicopter, where you started to see things from a different perspective, and that made you take action. So for a lot of us, we're thinking, well, if I feel fearful, I'm just not going to do it because I'm going to protect myself. And that's the opposite of mission first. That's me first. But when we can just sit back and say, like, how can I reframe this, look at it in a different way, and then still proceed? I think that's incredibly important. Still move forward, still push ahead. How can you describe that for people to understand what awfulizing is? We all do it. So if someone says, yeah, but then how do we control it so it doesn't overtake us and then prevent us from taking the next step forward?
Well, awfulizing feels really kind of good, right? It's very familiar, like, oh my God, this is terrible. It'd be the worst case scenario, blah, 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 blah. So, those words, and I'm not the first one to ever said this, but those words create thoughts, create emotions, they create actions, all those things. But once you can identify that and accept it, like, okay, I get it. The worst case scenario is not going to happen. That might, but just to redirect your language, like language discipline, inside your mind, outside your mind, both ways. I mean, if you can control that language, and it's very simple, hard to do sometimes, but control the language, because it produces those thoughts. And I think every human being in this world goes through the worst case scenario, like, oh my God, this is going to happen. It's going to be terrible. Well, most of the time it doesn't happen. If it does happen, well, it's over. Right. So I think, I try to teach, like, with people, like, look, just control your language. If you can start to just control how you say things to yourself, and then especially if it comes out your mouth and goes in your ear, that's a big deal. Just control it. Just control it. People talk about mantras and all that, which I'm not saying like, oh, you want to go out there and say you're the best and big, but just control your damn language, and you'll control your mindset over that and start taking action, individual little bit pieces of action, which turns into big action, right? I mean, nothing happens huge like that. You take pieces and you chunk it together and re-talk yourself through it. So, I mean, for the SEAL, for our world, it was very important. Like, you could sit there all day and be like, oh God, because every day you're doing a mission, or every night, maybe 1, 2, 4 missions, and you could awfulize it to death and just think, oh, I'm not going to live through this, right? And then that dream or that awfulization would come true, because now you're shutting down your brain, you're shutting down your executive function, all those things. So you won't be at your best. You won't be able to plan at your best. So
Yeah, you talk about after action reviews and you talk about how important they are to complete after a mission. Let's say if you're saying you're doing, 4 missions in a row
yeah.
and one mission goes really, really bad, do you do your after action review right after every mission or after everything is complete? How do you reset and reframe your mind from going from a mission number one that didn't go your way to then mission number 2 to make it better? And I know there's not many missions that don't go a Navy SEAL's
Oh.
way, but there's always something that could have been done better.
Well, the
Do
most
you
important ones, actually, the most
Yeah.
important ones are the ones that didn't go well, because a lot of the ones that went well, you don't learn lessons. You're like, it's worked out perfectly. But the ones that don't go well, and hopefully no one get hurt. But the after action review is not just it's not, it's a process, but it's a life way of process. It's a lifestyle, because even though if like in training, we would go through in a house and we would practice an assault or do something. It's always stop, look, here's 5 things, right? What happened? What do we want to do? What happened? What went well? What went wrong? And what are we going to change? It's always that process. It's not sweeping it under the cover, because a lot of businesses, I've noticed that they're like 6 month review, maybe a year review, but they don't even know. They don't know feedback. People don't know feedback, but we try to give feedback immediately without the ego. And that's how we call it evolution. Everything we do is an evolution because we evolve. And that's the mindset process, continuously evolve from something where you're at to where you're going to go. And that is a fundamental principle, AAR, just built into us. And I think most people would benefit from that, just being honest, because what it says is being honest on a team, being honest in a group or whatever it is, you're actually honest. And honesty kind of breeds like success, because if you're not honest, things get swept, right? Like, oh, so.
And then they happen again. What do you do when someone, like you're doing an after action review with someone, you're reviewing what went wrong, and they are coming from a place of self-deluding themselves. Like they do not accept accountability. They are saying that it's because of this, because of that. And you're saying, no, it's because of this. But they literally have a blind spot to their role and their accountability in it. How do you handle a person that has that ego that's blocking them from seeing what they're doing wrong?
Well, it started from day one in our organization that is part of your process. And even though you might be an admiral, and we have these, small ones, micro ones, bigger, bigger, bigger. And then after every major deployment, we have after action views, and the admiral sits in the front, the senior person, and he's not up there giving directions. He's taking notes. And because the ego has to come out of it. And we get used to this. Like, look, it's not a performance review. It's not a critique of you. It's what did you do?
Mhm.
And that is, for us, it becomes just a process. Like everybody accepts it. I mean, occasionally people do, they get offended and like, look, it's not about bashing you. It's not tearing you up. It's not telling you, you're not adequate or whatever, but we have to figure this out so we go forward. Yeah, we do it at the highest rank, at the lowest rank. And I mean, it's probably pretty rare. In most organizations, they don't do that. But the admiral will set up in front and listen, not talk. And he will basically be told what he needs to do. So, yeah.
So would you recommend that for the world of business that we
Well, I
do?
do.
Yeah.
Yeah, if they can create an honest, respectful, I mean, I'm not going to be a CEO of some company and, listen to gripes and bitches, right? It's not that.
Yeah.
It's like, look, here's what like is happening. This is what I think. And then they can hear it from, the boss's mouth, so to speak, or
Yeah.
whatever. And they can understand the context of what they're talking about, what's happening, why it's happening. And that's what we would do. And then if there's something needs to be changed, like, okay, the mission others me is like, all right, the boss is like, what do you need from me? Okay, this is what I need. And I mean, I think it's a sense of honesty. And then people feel empowered, which empowerment is a big thing for people. in their own lives, because we're all individuals, but to feel empowered inside of any organization and no matter where they're at, right? So
Yeah, I think that's really important. And it's good to hear that that happens at this high level of high performance, as opposed to
yeah,
people thinking the opposite. Because it sounds good in theory, but does it actually happen in practice? And the answer is yes. At high performing teams have to
they do.
have this kind of a horizontal leadership instead of it
Yeah,
just being all vertical, where you have to come down from your rank and just listen to what the people are saying instead
that's
of
right.
just leading with rank, which I'm sure happens also.
Oh, it
There,
happens. Oh, it
there are
happens.
times where you're leading with rank, but there's times where
And
you
it's
come.
awful when you see it. You can see the organization to like, it's terrible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Meaning you know what's going to happen next.
Well, and they don't function the same way. You can feel
Yeah,
it inside of it. It's like, it's not working here, and because maybe the boss or whatever is just doing that the pyramid thing on himself. Like, no.
yeah,
Especially, I mean, high performing organizations that are doing crazy, crazy stuff and things are moving. And because our world was very fluid. I mean, it was, it could change at any moment, and you really had to turn that, pyramid upside down, as people say, and trust the guys on the ground instead of trusting just the guys on the top. And that was a very fundamental switch after 9/11 for us, because Cold War, military, not many conflicts. It was pyramid. Everything was run by the top. And by the time it got to the top and back down, it was over, right? The fight was over. So we learned that really quickly, that and our senior leaders, the really smart ones, and the smart, slash like understanding ones, they would be like, okay, what do you need from me? Not what I need
yeah,
from you. Yeah.
yeah. That's really good. Like following the field.
And
In your book, you talk about just the accountability. I really wanted to get into this with the audience because a lot of us, we have really good reasons for why we are not achieving what we're not achieving. But in your book, you talk about there's only really three responses that you can give when you're taking extreme ownership over what you're doing. If you can share what those three responses are for someone that is highly, highly accountable, and why that needs to be so important to keep it simple, so we're not just creating a place where we're getting very wordy and we are reasoning out our accountability. So what are those three responses that you have
well,
to have,
I'll
and
be
why is this
very
so
clean.
important?
I'll
Yeah,
be
no,
very
you
clean.
can say it. Our
Okay.
audience can take it.
Well,
Say it.
I mean, and this is the language discipline we talk about. We teach SEALs, and when you train a SEAL for the first 6 months, it's not complicated stuff. It's not lasers and all this technology. It's basic mental stuff like that. And we might task them to do way too much stuff, which we do, right? You can't get it done. Here's a time limit, and we watch their response, right? And we want to like teach them that language discipline. And the only three things you can say is, like an instructor comes up to a SEAL or new candidate. It's like, did you get your job done? He's like, yes, no, and I fucked up. And even though we know, like if you give them just say an hour to do something, might take 2 hours or whatever, you know they're not going to get it done. But what happens was, over time, those excuses, because it's easy to default to that excuse, right? Like, oh, well, I didn't have enough time, my parents weren't good enough, and blah blah, whatever. You can go on and on awful lots about your whole life. But like, no, for us, the accountability means the mission. You own the mission. It is you. Acceptance of the outcome. So to teach them yes, no, and I fucked up is constantly breaking them. They're like, okay. So you'll see the kid, the students over time, not long, they start to like develop like this mindset of innovation.
Mhm.
Innovation meaning they'll get shit done. We make shit up, whatever you want to call it. But it's like that innovation, that like, hey, every person on that team starts to understand that anything they can do to get that damn job done, they do it. Not like, well, we couldn't do it because of time, like all that bullshit. And so we can see it very quickly when a student, it clicks in their brain, because what we do is you separate that excuse from them. and they don't go to the default to the excuse or like, because no one cares about it. Like, look, you know, we'll tell them, like, do you think anyone in history cares about a failed Navy SEAL mission or, you know, a mission? No, they don't give a shit. They don't care, right? It failed.
Mhm.
You can have a broken finger, broken back, whatever the case is, but got it. You don't have the equipment. Nobody cares. So it continuously keeps you from that excuse, because that excuse is almost like a lover, right? It's like a person you fall in love, thing you fall in love with, and it feels good. And everybody was like, oh God, yeah, poor you. But I'm like, not in our world. Like, not poor you. You get it done and you figure it out. Just don't go to that excuse world. So, and I think it's very important. Anyone, yes, no, and I messed up or I fucked up, you know, but just to constantly do that in your mind, you'll start to realize that you, me, all of us, we do it often. It's like, oh, I just went to an excuse that makes me feel good, but doesn't do me any good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is powerful because it also helps you to run more clean. You're not carrying that weight of just all these stories that you have to carry with
Oh,
yourself to, you know, when you're with people and they have these stories, for me, it's an indication if something's not the truth here, because the truth is simple and you're too elaborate with all of your details. I
right.
don't know what's going on here, but it doesn't sound very truthful. Yeah. I would love for us to talk about the SEAL chief that you mentioned in the book,
Mm,
because you know, so much of the training that goes on is it's always resetting the default. Like, what will be the default of your response? What will be the default of your actions? And then it falls back on the training. Like, you train this certain way to
yeah,
be able to perform in that time. And you're always training in a very realistic form. And
yeah,
then making so when that high stress comes, just what your book is all about, like when you're under that tremendous stress, your default is already programmed into you. And you talk about the SEAL chief that was shot 27
yeah,
times,
yeah,
you know, just to understand this. And he literally fell back on his training where he would, it's just what you said in the beginning, like the words he said
yeah.
to himself. You know, if you can talk about that to people, because under this tremendous stress, he was able to get himself out of this scenario being shot 27 times, which is very, very amazing.
Yeah. What's an insane story. I mean, you know, if you can read through the book and read through the story, I mean, obviously he went into a room in Fallujah, you know, during, you know, I think it was 2007, I think it was 2006, whatever. In that time period, you go into a room, enter the room, 4 terrorists committing suicide by like shooting at him, shot the first SEAL behind him, and you're talking like 10 feet, 15, 20 feet, whatever it was, you know, very close range with rifles. And as he goes in, he was being shot, exploded his weapon. So his rifle is broken, doesn't work. Pulls his pistol, shoots one guy. And, you know, I might be foggy on the story in a few years, but as he's shooting, they're shooting him. And obviously he has body armor on that protects his, you know, his heart and stuff. As he hits the ground, explosions go off and stuff. He's reloading, just doing what he's done 1,000 times. And he actually kills all 4 of them with those many shots in his body. And you know, his fingers are shot off. He's getting shot all over the body, you know, everywhere. He picks up. He had enough sense about him because he trained through this, is to pick up the ready of the dead SEAL behind him and call in, like, hey, don't call in an airstrike, because they were like going to call in an airstrike. And he goes into the next room and picks up a weapon, goes in the next room and captures like 4, I think it was 2 or 4 other like bad guys. They just gave up, like, oh my God, you can't kill this guy. Yeah. Mike Day,
Wow.
good guy.
Wow.
And obviously, you know, this year he killed himself. He took his own life, which was unfortunate. But yeah, he fell back on what he had done and trained. Just it just worked perfectly. Yeah.
You know, this is something you and I have spoken about in the past, where just like, what can we do for, you know, people that serve our country and just go through just tremendous acts of bravery, and then they come back home, and then they, it's a whole thing that they have to acclimate to, a different type of living, different people that
Yep.
they're around. And
Yep.
it's not easy for a lot of people. And so towards the end, we can talk about like how we can find ways to give back to the community that like serves and protects our nation. That's incredibly important to me, something I believe in and contribute to.
Yep.
But just to take a moment for people to understand that it's not that it ever gets easy. I think that's what a lot of people need to understand. A warrior isn't someone that's just like, I'm strong and nothing's going to affect me. I'm
Right.
just, cold, made of steel. No, things still affect someone with a strong personality, but it's like the constant retraining, the retooling, the reframing, and never giving up so that you're getting better and pushing yourself. I wanted to ask you, because I know this is really important for the community. Like, what do you do, especially after serving 20 years as a Navy SEAL? Like, how did you come back and say, how do I reframe myself? How do I retool
Mm.
myself? Because this individual was able to do it at that time because he trained
Right.
so hard. And when he had that, the close combat training with the real live ammunition, or the stuff that was very similar to it, his commander was always screaming to him, keep fighting, keep fighting, keep fighting,
Right.
and so he heard that voice in him. But when you come home, when you're not training with, in combat, like what other voices are you hearing? How do you keep yourself in a situation where you're still fighting, but not at war anymore, not in combat, but still to just live a good life and to be well?
That's tough. No, I
Yeah.
mean, you're right. I mean, and first of all, I appreciate you donated to a lot of SEAL stuff that we've done. I really appreciate that. We really did.
It's
Um,
my honor. Thank you.
no, thank you very much. I mean, it was very generous of you and how you did that. Thank you. But um, it's a brotherhood, sisterhood. I wish it would, it, as I speak, like I talk about the brand of brotherhood and the battle rhythm, which alliteration, but it's really sisterhood. It's a camaraderie. There's a feeling of worth with other people as well. And I think that mission others me, that mom model goes, because it's easy to forget that when you get out, when you go do something else, and you're not around that anymore. Um, and obviously, people like, Chief, he had to deal with that demon. He had to deal with it. Uh, a lot of guys do, a lot of people do. And I think is putting purpose, like I'm working on right now. I think I spoke to you about. It's like I'm working on an ethos kind of book right now, character book about just like now what. In some sense, because that was my question. Now what do I do with my life? You've done it. You jumped out of planes. You've done all that blah blah blah, all that stuff. You're like, yeah, I was never driven by money, so money wasn't my biggest thing. But how do you fulfill that void in your body, in you? And I think a lot of people feel that in their lives, right? Even I'd say 40, maybe 35 or 40 plus. Once they're successful, or getting successful, whatever, that's not enough. Is you really want to fill it with that. That to me, it's only about love, and that's the only thing I've ever really seen that matters at all. Strange as it might sound, but just to fill your life with that, and fill your life with a purpose, drive, whatever it is. Even if you're like, I don't care what you're doing in your life, but drive with that purpose to those people that you're around. Yeah, the mission, yeah, got it. We'll do that. And that's kind of gives us a playing field, but also just that love with other people, and that camaraderie, that, kinship and stuff. And I think that is where sometimes we fall short. We don't go after that. We don't know it or whatever afterwards. But anyone doing anything in their lives, I mean, if you're doing it 8, 10, 12 hours a day, love it. Love the people you're around. I mean, do your mission, got it, and then focus on other people. And once your others focus, and that's where you can really have passion in your life. and which I call love. I mean, I think it is. I think it's what we all seek, instead of just creating something, doing something, and getting ahead. And that's great, of course. But I think once you invest yourself in that loving kind of personality and just your life, I think that's where it's at. I think that's the sweet spot, and a lot of us are trying to focus on that, and getting to the point like, oh, now what, and figuring that out. I work with a lot of kids in the foster youth and juvenile system, and
Yeah.
to me, that was one of the promises I made to myself, because I saw a lot of kids suffering overseas, and I'm like, I'm going to do this, and it's, obviously it's a hard road because you're the government and all those things, but it's very fulfilling, and it's just rewarding on a lot of different levels. And I think that's what all of us would love to have in our lives. You make money, got it, but also just be fulfilled, do something meaningful. And
Yeah, I think you would really like to hear this, but I watched a documentary on the afterlife and what happens to people when they die. And it was actually given by a professor who was a big skeptic. And he said, like, there is no afterlife, nothing happens, like it's just done. But he started diving into this really deep, and he went through like tens of thousands of cases where they all said very similar things. By the end of the documentary, he was like, listen, uh, without a doubt, there is something that is going to happen when you pass away. And the thing that they said over and over again is that you're met with this, bright light, but the light is, the only word that you could properly describe it is love. It's just
it.
this unconditional love that you feel. And for the people that come back, because this is what they studied, they're given specific instructions. And guess what instructions they're given? That you have to love the people,
Yeah.
love the people that you're around. And in your book, you talk about, the opposite of fear is not courage, it is love. And
Yeah.
if you can explain to the audience what this means, because the one thing I feel from like the Navy SEAL community is a deep love for their nation, a deep love for their brotherhood, a deep love for what they do. And it's something that's truly remarkable. And that's why the service that you give is so incredibly powerful, and it inspires me. This is why I always say, what can I do to give more? I haven't served in the military, but just in my regular life, what can I do to give more, to serve more? And it comes from a place of love. So why is the opposite of fear love? Because I feel like when people are fearful, they retract, they do less, they isolate themselves. It gets very lonely, but that's not why we're here on earth. In
No.
fact, we are commanded to love one another. And that means we have to get around our people. What if a business leader actually loved their people? What kind of business would that be? Could you
Well,
speak on that? Why is the opposite of fear love?
well, in the fear I'm talking about, I'm not talking about the physical necessary fear, which once you're in the physical fear, like if a lion's chasing you, you're really not scared anymore. Like sometimes we're running around with guns at the middle of the night, whatever. There's no more fear. It's over. But the fear of like, you know, self-doubt, just embarrassment, all kinds of fear. Like I speak for a living, and I spoke with you guys, and I saw a statistic. It said, and multiple different levels of stats say this, but people fear more about public speaking than they do of dying, which
Mm.
is obviously strange. And so people would rather be in the coffin than they would give it a eulogy, right?
Yeah.
So, but it's, embarrassment, it's humiliation, and that's where I've talked about the after action review process, where we create an environment. Our goal is to create an environment. There is no fear about that. It's like, this is just honesty. Be honest with it. And, because we're all searching for the same thing. I believe. I mean, most people may never find it. They die without doing it, but just to love, live in that world, that space of love. And if you do that, I think the rest of it's going to happen, right? It's going to happen. It's like, okay, you got to work and you got to do different things, but that's the space, man. I mean, that is it. Because we laugh, or kind of, well, we joke a lot because SEALs are a bunch of clowns, and that's another way we're dealing with stress. But it's like you don't fight for the enemy in front of you. You fight for the people beside you, behind you, and that is a sense of love. And most SEALs will probably never say that right out loud. And they're like, we're tough guys, and whatever. But that's what it is. You might not even like the person you're working with, but if you respect them, you have this trust with them, that's a love. And you open that up in your heart and your life. And that's where I think we should all live, because, we're all, one day we're not going to be here. Right. So, and that is probably the best expression of our human uh, emotions, and is to actually love something and continuously build on that love.
Yeah, towards the end of your book, you give like a really, really powerful something that you have to do every time you go into combat. You have to write a letter to your
Yep.
family in the event that they have to deliver it to your family because you passed away. And as I was writing this, I was going through something that was a little difficult, and I actually did this, and it was very hard to do.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it gets easier, but I just recommend that, if people can really understand how powerful every day is, and like if you had to just write down a letter to the people that you love, that you care about, and know that tomorrow you're not going to see them, who would you write this letter to? What would you say? Because a lot of us, we think we have more time and time will
Right.
heal things, but we don't know that for certain. And what do you want people to know, that you thought about them, and that you really did care about them? I think that's incredibly important. What was the significance of doing that letter writing for you? Did it get easier with time, or did it help you? I know you said in your book, like it helped you to go to war and fight and actually do it from a better place, and you wanted your family to know that you were happy doing what you were doing.
Yeah. Well, it's a difficult one, but I did it multiple, 9 times, I think. But,
Wow.
um, because we'll do a drill with people where, write the letter and then you write another letter of who the people you want to read it. And I would tell anybody this, is, yeah, you write that letter. Most of the letters start with, I did my best, right? Somewhere in that letter, that's what we all say. So
Yeah.
what we would do, like, you go through the process, and it's a very sterile process. You go with the lawyers when you're getting ready to deploy. And here's your will, and then if something happens, they'll tell your spouse, whatever. Like, okay, if you see a couple people in uniform show up to the door, he's dead, he's gone. Like, who do we call? What do we do? And, it's a formal process. But then for the service members, you can put with your will, that letter, like, okay, what do you want to say to people when you're gone? And then, obviously who gets to read it, the other section of it. No. And I think almost all of us come to the same thing. I did my best. I love you. I care about you. And then, and as a leader, I would tell people, look at that, go, okay, look at your second letter. Who's not getting to read that? And if you work with someone 12 hours a day, right? That's your life. I mean, that's a big part of your life. That is a huge, impactful part of your life, where you could have such a huge impact, their life, your life, and the fulfillment of your life. So it's a good exercise just to go, what would I say to people? Because I can promise you, no one be like, well, I wish I'd had a bigger Ferrari, or, like, no one says that.
Yeah.
It's a very emotional thing. And it's like, wow, I would have been better. I wish I'd have been better. I'd done this. I love you. Just go through those steps. And then once you go through those steps, go, okay, well, how do you make your life like that now, that you won't have to write that letter and feel bad about it? Or, how do you write your own life? And that's what I'm working on with the ethos, the ethos for the soul is what I'm going to call it, is how do we do it? How do we actually, as professionals in this world, and yeah, maybe you're 25 years old, this might not resonate with you, but it could. It didn't with me back in those days, but like now it resonates every day of my life. Like, what could I have done better? Who did I love? Who did I care about? And that is it. That's where it's at. That's your sweet spot, I think.
Well, I am 100% with you, and I think it's important for people to understand too, like we do go through different phases of our lives. You know, when we're 20, we're like, I don't care about the love, give me the Ferrari. I want
That's
the
right. That's right.
Ferrari, and I'll deal with the love after. But as you age and as you gain experience and you evaluate your experiences in life and you look at to see it from a place of more wisdom, you really do understand like you're going to continue to live through other people, not through things. You know
Right.
what you did for other people, that's like the spirit that continues to live on. You know, the last question I had for you was, you're working on this new book, and you know, what could you say that you've learned about the soul and the spirit that you didn't know before, that it's really amazing for you to learn this? If you can give us
Mm.
a little teaser of the stuff that you're
Well,
learning, because this is a big thing for people to be mentally well. I believe you have to not have voids in your soul. I think you can try to fulfill it on a physical level. You can try to fulfill it even on a mental level. But if that soul is left depleted, you will struggle. So how do we, is there anything that you've learned in the study of this that maybe can help us to nudge us in a direction for
well,
fulfill?
it goes back to that, as you define, and I would say define your own life, right? Because I don't know how many people define their lives. I didn't. Like I
Yeah,
just kind of went through life and did my thing. And, as I'm trying to, or working to define it right now, it's like, what does it all mean? Which means I have to give it meaning.
yeah,
I don't think there's any intrinsic or extrinsic meaning to it all. I don't know, but it goes back to that love. Like, look, if you can love something deeply in your heart and live in that space, no matter what you're doing, you're going to be fulfilled. You're going to be happy. If all billionaires were the happiest people on earth, they would never like kill themselves or never, do what they do, but they do. So nothing fills that void, I think, except the human connection with all of us, and like, and living, for yourself, but also outside yourself, like others focused. And once you do that, and it becomes a very positive thing in your life, and it's selfish in itself, right? In some sense, but it's also fulfilling. And
yeah.
that's, I think the best we can do is like be as good as you can be, and, serve others. So,
Yeah, I am with you 100%. You know, Ed, I'm happy to know you, to have spoken to you multiple times and to get to
yep.
know you as time continues. But I would like for people to know how they can find out more about you, like if they want to work with you, if they want to just learn more about your books, where would they go to get this information?
Well, you can go to edhiner.com. The books now, which we talked about before, I think before we recorded, McGraw-Hill, my publisher, which I'm not happy with, they discontinued their whole section. So I'm working on getting a self-publishing to go through that. But yeah, I think it'll still be on Amazon right now. But yeah, go on
And yeah,
Amazon.
you can get it Kindle, you can get Audible.
And that's right. Yeah, just, reach out to me at edhunter.com, and I would love to respond, because I get emails all the time, and it's, people think that they may think that, well, I'm bugging this guy, whatever, but I absolutely love it. When I hear people like they'll email me a story of their life and this section of the book that meant something to them, I'm like, thank you. That is so rewarding to me. Yeah, just to hear that from people. So please do it. I mean, just email me. I will respond. So
Okay, great. Well,
yeah,
thank you for your time and thank you for
thank
your
you.
wisdom. We really appreciate you being on Standalone today. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, ma'am.